Hello and welcome back to another episode of ChristinaLee.Meditation AU. I'm Christina Lee and I am a dotting artist, and today we're going to be talking about paint. I'm putting together a series of videos that help the very beginning dotting artist answering all the questions I wish I knew when I was beginning dotting, and hopefully this can help you save a little bit of heartache and some cash about what to buy, what not to buy, and what to start with. But before we continue on, I want to make sure and thank my Patreons. Without you guys, this video would not be possible. There's a couple of different things I'm going to be covering in this video. I'm going to be covering different types of paint, different mediums, different varnishes, also how to store your paints, and some of my personal favorites. There's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just going to be giving you some tricks and some insights that I have experienced over the last couple of years. I wanted to just make a quick note also before I move forward with the explanation of all the different things, is that I am based in the US, and so some of the products that I have, if you're not here, if you're in a different country, you may not have access to the same things I do, and vice versa. There's some things that I see online that other people are using in other countries, and I don't have access to that. So I'm going to try to explain things in a way that is kind of more universal in what to look for in a good quality paint, and also just some of the basics that you're going to need to do this art. I know this seems like a lot to look at, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the things that I've collected over the last couple of years. These are some varnishes that I have. These are some sealers for different types of surfaces, gessos. Yes, that's chalk paint you can use as a gesso. And also some mediums, different kinds of pouring mediums, heavy gloss gel, the different ways you can thin or thicken your paint. I'm going to talk about all those things. Also, I'm going to be talking about all the different kinds of paints that you can find in the stores. There's quite a few, and yes, I am addicted to buying paint. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with paints that are great right out of the container. You don't have to thin them out. You don't really have to do anything with them, maybe a little mixing before you start. But I wanted to just show you, like, if you're just starting out and you don't want to get into mixing yet, feel a little intimidated by it, these are going to be some of the paints that are perfect right out of the bottle. So these are the flash paints. You can find these on Amazon. I think they've recently sold out, but hopefully soon they'll get these back in stock. But it comes like this. Sometimes you'll have to mix that. You can see the paint consistency is just a little bit on the thicker side. I would say consistency wise, you're going to want something, it's kind of a window, and this is a little more on the heavier side, but this is still okay to use. I would say this is about as thick as you'd want to get though. And you can see how pretty thick that is. So the flash paints come with a non-metallic finish and also a metallic finish. They're two different sets, each have 25 in them. This is a piece I did with the non-metallic finish, a couple of different colors used there. And then this is one that I used with the metallic paints. I didn't add any mediums to these, so these are all just straight out of the bottle, and it turned out pretty nice. I also wanted to mention that these are multi-surface paints. I'm going to go into more on that later, and they are also pretty affordable. So I got these on a sale, both sets. There's 25 in each, so a total of 50 paints for I think around $35 to $40. So if you check Amazon, just keep checking to see if they have sales on them, and you can get a pretty good price on those. Anytime you go into a Facebook group and say, what is the best paint to start with? Everybody always says Deco Art Americana, #1. And I cannot agree more. This is absolutely 100% true. The texture of this paint is absolutely perfection. And also, it's a pretty good quality craft paint too. So I'm just going to show you. This is the Citron Green. I'm going to show you real quick what I mean about the texture of the paint and what you want to look for. See how it just kind of, it doesn't move very quickly. Like, it doesn't roll around a whole lot. It does a little. It kind of spreads out. Not super fast. But I wanted to show you how this thing, how it interacts with dotting tools. It sits on the tool really nicely. You can see that there's a nice little dot of paint on the tip of that. And so when you go to apply it, it's going to apply really nicely in a kind of a nice dome shape. And when you scoop it, it's not dripping off really fast. It's kind of hanging on to the tip of that tool pretty well. So that tells me that's a pretty good consistency of paint that you're going to want to sort of, it's going to kind of be your guide as you're experimenting with different kinds of paint. So I would say Deco Art Americana, even if you don't like the colors, get one bottle of it just to play with and see if, you know, how it interacts on the tip of the tool and how it sits. Also, I'm going to show you on this canvas how it interacts with the canvas. You're just applying, you're not pressing hard, you're not going fast, you're just allowing the paint to transfer from the tool to the surface. And so see how that dot is a little bit smaller? I'm going to come in and just add a little bit more paint to the top of that to make it bigger. So this is a really nice paint you can play with. You can also, if you've got ball stylus, you can do some walking dots. It's really nice. Very nice, round, even dots, and also the texture of the dots are nice and puffy. And those are going to dry down quite a bit, but it's still going to have a nice little dome shape when they dry. So that's the Deco Art Americana. You're going to be comparing all other paints to this paint. I personally prefer the Dazzling Metallics over the Americana, just because I love shiny things, and this paint is absolutely spectacular in texture. It's almost nearly the same as the Americana. I can hardly say that correctly. It's just a tiny bit thicker. It doesn't run as quickly as the other, but this is still definitely in the range of a very good paint. Because it's metallic, the formula is going to be a little different. So it's going to behave just a little bit differently on the tool, but it's still like a first cousin to the Americana, and the application is very simple. So that's a very, very nice paint to use. It's one of the first ones that I started off with that I really loved and I really enjoyed. These come in a set. I believe there's 18 in a set, and it's a total, I think, around $35, $40, depending on where you purchase this. And it's just, I think it's a really great paint, a craft paint. You can also get some of these. These are Extreme Sheen and Matte Metallics by Deco Art. I'm not as crazy about these. The paint tends to separate quite a bit more, so if you use these, you got to make sure you shake them really well. Also, the paints are a little bit different. They are a little bit thinner, and so when you're applying your dots, you have to apply them a little further apart than what you would normally be used to. And that was something that I had a hard time getting, kind of paying attention to and getting used to as well. Okay, so this one, even though I shook it up, you can see I still didn't mix it up very well, so I'm not going to demonstrate that one. But this one is the Extreme Sheen Coral color. It's a beautiful color. I actually use this as a background for a piece that I did. It's a little more stringy. I don't want you to be deterred by stringy paint, but sometimes a stringy paint can actually be a preference. I like stringy paint. It tends to be a little more on the thick side and holds a nice rounder shape. This is actually a very pretty color. So it's also another good one. Okay, so there's one more right out of the tube that I absolutely love and adore, and I 1000% recommend this all the time, is the Folk Art Color Shift. These paints are so beautiful. They are When I first started painting and I discovered these were some of my most favorite paints, and I still love these paints. Even after all the paints that I bought, these are kind of my go-to just because of how flashy and shiny they are, and also the texture of the paint is really nice. Some people get really frustrated by the stringiness of these paints and they add a little medium to it. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend having patience with this paint. See, it's kind of stringy. I recommend having a lot of patience with this paint. It takes a lot more time for it to settle. This is a thicker paint, but if you can have patience with this paint and get it to give you some really beautiful puffy dots, you absolutely will not be disappointed. Like, look how that string is just hanging out there. Whee! So yeah, I call this the stringy paint. But I'm going to show you what I mean about making a really fat, big fat dot with this. You're just going to have patience with this stuff. See, I want a little bit bigger dot. We're going to make a pretty significant dot. Sometimes I tend to, if I want a little bit bigger dot, draw the dot around with my tool. And once I have the circumference that I really like, or the diameter, the circumference of the dot that I want, then I can go back and I can just keep piling this paint on as high as I want. It's so much paint. And it's not going to run off the sides and spread. This is not the kind of paint that's going to do that. So you're going to have to let this sit and dry for several hours, but it's going to stay there. And it will flatten out quite a bit because that's just the nature of what paint does. It will dry out, but you're still going to get a really nice, beautiful, plumpy dot with this. Here's an example. This purple right here is the color Purple Flash from the Folk Art Color Shift. And I really layered these dots super high. It's got such an amazing texture to it. It's so lovely, so beautiful. And I don't know, there's something really magical about this paint. I wouldn't thin it, and it's going to treat you really, really, really well and give you a nice, round, beautiful dot. Okay, so let's just talk about Apple Barrel really quick. I'm not going to put a lot of time into it, but basically, don't buy this stuff. It's garbage. You get what you pay for. It's really yucky. It's the cheapest paint that you can find on the market. They sell it at Walmart, and the only thing that it's good for is like a base coat. If you want to have like a different color, you can use this as a base. Otherwise, this paint, it cracks. It dries super flat. It's really, really hard to get a round dot with this. So if you start dotting with this and you're getting frustrated that you can't get nice, round, beautiful dots, it's not you, it's your paint. Before we go on to paints that you can mix things to, I wanted to just quickly talk about multi-surface paints. I don't have a lot of experience in multi-surface crafts like ceramics or, glass, cups, tiles, anything that's not basically a canvas, or even wood. I don't have much experience with that, but I have asked a lot of people about it and gotten a lot of feedback, and the best paints that people have said are the Deco Art Americana multi-surface satin paints and also the gloss enamel. These two are the best. I've found these at Walmart and also Michael's, and you don't have to do anything to them. The texture, the consistency is just what you're looking for. Also, you do not want to, if you are doing like an enamel or painting on a multi-surface, you don't want to dilute your paint with water or any sort of medium whatsoever. It's not recommended to do that. So you want to find a paint that's perfect right out of the bottle. You don't have to do anything to it. So if you have to cure it or if you have to do anything to it, it's not going to lose its integrity. So just keep that in mind if you're wanting to do something that is not on a canvas, you're going to want to use the multi-surface on that. Before we go any further in the heavy body paints, which are some of my favorites, I do want to talk to you about mediums because there is a lot to choose from out there, and I'm going to tell you my personal favorites and also what might be best for you. These are just some of the different brands that I have that is available on the market, and when I first started, it was really hard to figure out which one was going to be the correct medium for me. And these are a little bit more expensive, so it's definitely an investment, and it's something to think about if you're wanting to step out of the Deco Art Americana paint selection. You're going to want to invest at least in some sort of pouring medium. First of all, this is a gloss gel. This is specifically for paints that are too thin. Very, very, very rarely do I ever use this. I've had this for 2 years now, and you can see how much I've used. And the only paint that I really have that I use this with is called Lumiere. This might have been sitting around for a while, so this actually I might not need it anymore for that tube. But when you're doing maybe about this much paint, you're literally just using about that much medium to mix in with your paints here. So it just doesn't take a whole lot, but it's going to thicken your paint up. It's going to give your paint body, and it's going to be, especially if it's a really fluid paint, this is what you're going to want to go for. But probably most people don't hardly ever use this stuff. Floetrol versus pouring medium. There's different companies that sell pouring mediums, and I have always just used either Liquitex or Floetrol, and these are like 98% the same, except this bottle of Liquitex pouring medium is probably about $14, and this big bottle of Floetrol I spent maybe $7 on Amazon. So they are a little bit different. Of course, the Liquitex is a little bit better because it is meant to be used for higher quality paints, and Floetrol I think is usually tend to be used with like house paint, but essentially the formula is almost exactly the same. And if you're on a budget, I would just use this. I did for years, and I kind of feel like I'm at a place where I really want the quality of my work to stand out, and the tiny little bit more, it does make a difference to me. And so sometimes I will also use my Liquitex pouring medium, if that makes sense. But I just want to be clear that, especially if you're going to be investing or purchasing the Arteza Metallic set, I absolutely encourage you to get the Floetrol because you're going to be using a lot of it. So if you know anything about me or my work, you probably know that I am an Arteza whore. I don't know how else to put it. But they make some of the most beautiful metallic paints that I've ever come across. They're just delicious, luxurious. They look expensive when you use them in pieces. And I love this set because most of the colors that they have, they all go with each other. So if you get this set and you're like, oh my God, I can't pick a color palette, all the colors, almost every single one of them go with one another. So you can just, pick this one, and this one, and you can make a beautiful piece with it. So I love and adore this set. Anybody that follows me, they get really comfortable using this very quickly. And when you're mixing the paints, you're going to be mixing 50% paint to 50% Floetrol. So you're going to be using a lot of Floetrol. That's why I encourage people to get that instead of the pouring medium, because you're going to be going through bottles of the pouring medium very quickly. Liquitex Basics acrylic is also a very, very thick paint. It is a heavy body paint, and I bought the entire 48 sample size set, and they're okay. I don't love the colors. It's not my favorite set in the world, but the thing about these is they are absolutely brilliant for putting in cones and drawing lines with. So if you like to do a lot of line mandalas with a lot of lines in them, like really sharp, nice, beautiful lines, this is a really awesome paint to stick in cones. But if you're starting out and you're like, oh, what's a cone? That's not this conversation to be having, but that's what I love it for. Okay, I'm going to be talking about Arteza quite a bit probably today. This is part of the Pearl set that I got. And the truth be told, I have all the iridescents and the pearls in their bottles here. They're absolutely lovely paints, and they're just a smidge too thick. So you're going to have to thin them out just a little bit. It's like a reward. You have to work for it, but it's kind of worth it. In my opinion, all Arteza, you're going to have to thin out just a little bit of the ones that I have used, but it's not nearly as much as the tubes or the heavy body paint. This, I believe, is considered medium. So we'll demonstrate that in a sec. I wanted to show you the difference between the tube and the bottle of Arteza paints. The tube, you see, it's not moving at all, and it is just standing there very as if we just left it there. But this one, it is moving around. It is very slow. It's a little thicker than the folk art color shift that we just tried a little bit earlier. And this paint is just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit too thick. See, it's not settling quite like as quickly as we'd like to see. So what that means is that if your paint is too thick, then it's going to be much harder to dot. Let me show you what I mean. The dots are not quite as perfect as I like them to be. You are not going to get a nice, beautiful dot with this. There we go. I mean, that's giving me a big attitude problem, right? So that's not what we want. Unless you really, really want that spiky and that's the look you're going for, then that's your paint. But let me demonstrate for you about how I thin this out. Whoops. That's a bit much. But it's about 50-50 is what we're looking for. And it's approximate. We're looking for the right texture. Make sure I mix it really well. And so there is a range of paint consistency that is good for dotting. The thicker the paint, the puffier the dot you can make. The thinner the paint, you can do really nice, long, smooth swooshes. So something to keep in mind. It took me a little while to figure that part out. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm pulling the paint up and I'm seeing how quickly it settles. If it settles too fast, that means it's too thin, and that's going to happen on your canvas. This is just a smidge thinner than I like it, but it still will work really well for making dots. So let's come over and watch how it will make a really pretty dot now. And see how it just kind of makes that nice dome shape. Nice round dome shape. Something else with the Arteza is you can make really fat, plumpy dots with this. If you get it just a little bit thicker, it will stand taller. But you can see like that paint really isn't going anywhere. It's just gonna be a really nice puffy dot. So, yay, we love Arteza. That's the metallics. So I've got some of this extra here. I'm gonna go ahead and use this to just thin this out a little bit. Like I said, it's almost perfect. It's just not quite there. We don't want a whole lot. Just enough to make it flow a little bit better. You want to make sure it's mixed in really well. You see how when I pull up, it makes that peak right there? And if I leave it alone, that peak is going to settle down into a really beautiful, perfect dome shape. As it dries, it's going to be the most beautiful and perfect dot. Here's a piece that is done with all Arteza metallics. They're all the heavy body paints and thinned out about 50% with the pouring medium. And it's one of my favorite pieces. It's so beautiful. There is a tutorial available on my YouTube channel that you can do this. I wanted to go over the other mediums that I have in my collection, why I would use these versus just the pouring medium, and what I use to, how I use these in application. First, this is an iridescent medium. This is a medium that I've had for 2 years, and I have just barely used it once or twice. You can add this to any paint to give it kind of a pearlescent look to it. This is a thicker medium, so if you've already got a thick, heavy body paint, you're going to have to add a pouring medium to this. But this is just going to add a little luster to your paint. If you've got something that is that doesn't have like a Deco Art Americana or something that doesn't have like a metallic finish, it'll give kind of an iridescent shimmer to it. But I actually prefer just to have the metallic paint personally. This is a flow medium. It's different than a pouring medium. It's thinner. And I'll show you the difference. This was the Floetrol, and I'm going to right next to it put some flow medium, sorry. And as you can see, it's thinner. It's kind of an in-between of a pouring medium and a flow aid, which I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. And I really like this one for when I do brush dotting. And I specifically like to use it with my Jo Sonja paints. So it's almost like this was made for Jo Sonja paints, and I love it. It's really nice, and it's a great medium to use, even with just regular paints. But it's a little spendy, so I don't use it as much as I think I would like to. But you can see how it moves around significantly more vigorous, I guess you could say. And so it's kind of like, this is a flow additive. It's kind of like taking a pouring medium and a flow additive and marrying them into a flow medium. So this is what's happening. The flow additive, this stuff is very potent, so you have to dilute it 1 part of this to 20 parts of water. So I take a different bottle and I do my ratio of 1 to 20. And I come up with something like this. Let's take this Basics acrylic paint. It's a heavy body paint. And we're going to break it down using just the flow additive mixture. So it's quite like our Arteza paint, how it's super thick. The peak does not go anywhere. And this we're going to add about 8 drops of the mixture. And this is going to try to liquefy our paint. It wants to make it flow. And I don't recommend this really doing this to your paints unless you have a specific I don't know, kind of purpose for it. It's going to make if you're not careful, it's going to make your dots a little bit flatter. It might be helpful if you're doing swoops, if you want to add like a drop or 2 of this to your, your mixture, like something that we mixed up here and that you already had with the pouring medium, just like adding another drop and just helping it with the flow, especially if you want to draw swoops with that. But that seems to be coming out pretty smooth. So that really, it intensely broke down that paint very quickly with just those 8 drops of the mixture. I should use this more, but I think it's just habit that I don't. This is one of the things that you don't need, but as you progress in your painting, it's something that you might want to just have on you. This bottle will probably last you 10 years, maybe longer. Why would you get gloss medium over pouring medium? The gloss medium is a little bit thicker. You're going to have to use a little bit more if you are knocking down the thickness of a heavy body paint. Otherwise, I honestly, to me, they're kind of just about the same. If you're going to be doing like mica powders and stuff, you might want to try to use the gloss medium. You might like that a little bit better than just the regular pouring medium. But if you're just starting out, there's no need to have this. Just stick with your pouring medium or your Floetrol for now. And as you expand your collection of mediums, then this one is nice to add later on. I do just quickly want to show you the texture of this one. It is a little more thick than the pouring medium. So it is going to take more of it if you want to thin down like a heavy body paint. What you could do if you really, really wanted to use it, you could, take this and mix like a drop or two of the ratio here. But I don't know, it's getting a little too technical and I wouldn't bother. To recap, if you're just starting out and you want to thin out a heavy body paint, don't bother with any of these except for the Floetrol or the pouring medium. Those are the two that you want. Pick one. Let's talk about prepping your surface. I love painting on records. It's one of my favorite things that is round, it's upcycling, it's clever, it's unique, and you want something. I personally like to have something that is still going to show the grooves of the records and not have brush strokes or interfere at all with what I'm going to be painting. This is Calancho. I did this on a record, and if you want to create this piece, it is a tutorial on my YouTube channel, but I sprayed this with the flat black. You want to make sure it's flat. If it is a glossy primer, it's going to be really hard to make the paint adhere without like running everywhere because of the glossy. It's going to want to kind of go everywhere. But the black primer, I love this. You can still see the grooves. See, it's dirty. You can see the grooves of the record. I think it just kind of keeps that, kind of honors what it was in a past life. And it preps the surface really nicely, and it's really, really fun to paint on. Mod Podge, I am just starting to warm up to this. I've always been afraid of using Mod Podge for some reason because I've heard rumors like people have been using this as a sealer for when they are done with a painting. They seal the paint, the dots with this thing, and it never cures, it never dries. And it's always tacky. And so I have always been terrified that might be something that would happen with a piece of mine, and I am not interested. But I did find out that this is a really good sealer for raw wood. And of all the other things that I've tried, I love this the best. Putting it on raw wood, sealing that up, and then painting on top of it with a gesso or some sort of primer. This is another all-purpose sealer you can use. It does a similar thing to Mod Podge. I'm finding that I like it. It's okay, but it's not my favorite or go-to. So, if you want to try it, you can. I don't recommend this one. But let's say you've got your surface. It's all primed. It's ready to go for your base coat. I am absolutely 100% adamant you get a gesso for a base coat. And let me explain why. When I first started painting, I heard this buzz about gesso. It's important to gesso your canvas. And I was like, gosh, gesso is super expensive. Why would I do that when I can just buy black paint? It's so much cheaper. I'll just use this instead of this. I'm going to show you why that's not a good idea. This is gesso. Let's do like 4 drops. And let's do 4 drops of, I guess 4 drops and then some of this black paint. I guess we kind of did something there. We'll come back and finish this in a minute with the paint before this comes to dry. What I wanted to show you was how much coverage you get and how much darker this is with the same drops of paint, the same amount. And what gesso does is it actually preps the surface of your canvas to be able to adhere the paint to the canvas better. So what I mean is the gesso has a little bit of tooth, a little bit of grip that's going to hold on to your paint better than just, just a regular paint. So if you can see the difference there, that's incredible. A big difference. I hope I proved my point in the gesso. There are 3 different kinds that you can get. The black gesso, honestly, this is absolutely, the Liquitex is my favorite gesso. And out of the 2 years I've been painting, I believe this is I think this is my 3rd, maybe my 4th bottle. It really lasts a long time. It preps a lot of canvases. And you really will not regret getting a black gesso. So many times people say, why did I wait so long to get my black gesso? So it also comes in white and clear. I use this more on special projects, and I'm not going to talk about now, but it's nice to have for those special projects, mostly just wood slices, but I really don't use this otherwise. I haven't used white yet. I really love black. It's my favorite. I do want to talk about chalk paint really quick. Chalk paint, you can use just like gesso. The tooth is the same on it, and I kind of wonder if the formulation is the same. And chalk paint comes in several different colors, not just this one I think is like a white, but it comes in all different colors. You can do all different kinds of backgrounds. What you can do is you can start with like a gesso base and add like a chalk paint layer on top. The paint is gonna, when you dot on top of it, the chalk paint is going to really hold on to that paint and have it just stay put. Sometimes like on a metallic surface or a metallic finish, it's really hard to get your dots not to move. They tend to want to kind of creep around because the surface is very slick and shiny. But chalk paint is another really great way to prep your canvas for painting. Okay, so let's talk about varnishes. Varnish is something that you're going to want to do to your canvas or surface once you're done painting it. It's going to protect the paint from fading, and also it just makes your painting last longer. It's going to protect the surface of it. And there's so many different kinds of varnish that you will want to probably check out. But the one that I started with is the campfire varnish. And this is a spray varnish. I got this one at Walmart. I believe they're right around $5 or $6. And you can do several canvases with these. This is great. You do like 1 or 2 coats of this. It creates a nice glossy finish for your mandalas, and it does the work just fine. And in fact, if you're just starting out and you're doing canvases, I definitely recommend this one because it's the easiest, and it's really hard to screw it up. I've never tried this one before. I just bought it recently to try it. I know a lot of people do use this one, and I'm sure it's just fine. It's by Deco Art, which is a very reputable brand. If you see this and you're like, might want to give it a try, I would say go ahead and do it. This one's an ultra matte varnish, which tells me that it's not going to be shiny or kind of give your painting a glossy look. That's going to, like if you have flat paints that you might be using and you want to keep that flat look, this might be a really great option for you. But the 2 that I use the most is the Gambar Gloss Varnish. I use this for my canvases, and the Liquitex Gloss Varnish I use for my stones. I also have a matte varnish that is just like the gloss varnish, but this is not going to reflect any light surface. It's going to absorb the light, so your colors on this one might be more saturated. And sometimes that's kind of the look you're going for. It's very similar to this. It's ultra matte versus matte, I guess. But let me show you a sample. Okay, so this is a gloss versus matte. And you can see this is the gloss varnish and this is the matte varnish. The matte varnish kind of looks like it doesn't have any varnish on it. So if you have a stone that you're like, I really don't want to change the look of this, when I varnish it, it's going to change. It's going to become kind of shiny. I don't want that. I'd rather keep it the way it is. That's when you're going to want the matte varnish. Otherwise, I honestly prefer the gloss varnish most of the time because it enhances the reflectiveness and makes things just shiny and sparkly. The camphor gloss varnish is when you're ready to upgrade your camphor varnish. This is a fantastic varnish. I love using this varnish instead of the spray because I do a lot of photography with my work, and a lot of times when you use a spray varnish, there is a reflection on your canvas that makes it really hard to see on film. And so when I use the camphor gloss varnish, I'm getting a lot less of that reflectivity. I'm still getting the protection and the shininess, but it's not reflecting as much light, and it's a lot nicer to be able to see the mandala. And it's tricky how to apply this. You can apply too much of it, and I don't recommend practicing varnishing on a masterpiece. I would say start off on a small piece and put your varnish in a bottle like this. This is an old practice piece, by the way, but this is your varnish. You're going to have a sponge, and you're just going to apply just a little bit in the center. I mean, just drops, and you're going to apply in an outward motion. And the reason why you want to use a sponge is because the sponge is going to dry up the extra varnish. You do not want to have too much varnish laying on top. It's going to puddle on your dots, and it's gonna become sticky. So that's why I say don't start off with a masterpiece. Start off on something small and practice with it. And as you're going, you can see where you might need to have to add another drop or something here and there. And I just usually only do one coat. You can do two. You want to make sure you wait until it's completely dry, probably a couple of days before you go ahead and varnish the second time. You just take time with this stuff. If you rush it, it will not be nice to you. So I learned that the hard way. So we'll try just like that. Okay, before we go, let's talk about storage. I know that so many people ask me about this. How do you store your paint so you are not wasting your paint when you're painting a piece? Or say you're mixing colors together and you don't want to have to go back and try to match that and like in another day when you come back to paint. So there's a couple of different ways you can store your paints. This is a plastic tray that comes with these flat discs. And you can get them wet, and they'll flatten right out. And you can also do this. You don't have to get this special tray for this. This was made for this kind of thing, but you can get like any plastic container, maybe one that you already have, and put like a damp cloth in there. And then you can put your paint in here and close this up. And this will keep your paint fresh for at least a couple of days. So you say you want to store it overnight, you want to come back and keep painting the next day, you can certainly try it this way. And that seems to be pretty successful for people. Another thing that I have done in the past, especially if I'm working on a big project, is I will, and especially for my Arteza paints, like, the heavy body paints, and I'm mixing them, I'll use these containers. These containers you can put mixed paints in, and they will last at least 2 weeks if the seal is good. So these just pop right off. You can mix your paints directly in there and seal them back up. And I would say, I don't know, these I've had paints last me up to a couple of months in here. Anything beyond that, it is going to start to dry out. So they're not going to be, nothing is going to last forever. So if you're mixing paints, mix just enough you think you can use for a project. Otherwise, if you're mixing a ton of paint and you're not going to use it all at once, just expect some of that to go to waste. I do have some of these too. I feel like these are for people who are a little more in control of their mess. You can mix paint in these as well. These are a little bit smaller containers. They have a screw top. They will eventually still dry out in these. And I have found with these screw tops, if I get any paint around the threads of this, the top, it becomes very difficult to open this up. So I'm really careful when I use these. Usually I use these for like mica powder mixtures, but these are also really adorable. If you are still with me, first of all, I'm really impressed. I have talked a lot. I am trying really hard to get everything in this video that I can possibly think of, and I know I'm going to forget something. There is one more thing I wanted to talk about though, and that is swatching your paints. When you get to a point where you have all this paint, sometimes you forget exactly what color each of your tubes are. And so there's a couple of different ways you can handle this. I personally have found the best way for me is to actually go ahead and get a canvas board and swatch my collection. So oftentimes I'll buy like a whole set of paint that comes like the Arteza Metallics have 36 different paints in there. And so I just went ahead and swatched all of them on a card. And then anytime I got any extras, I just added it below. And this is a really great way for me to just kind of reference, oh yeah, that's that color. Oh, that, you know, that'll go great with that kind of thing. This is the Liquitex Basics kit that I just got that I swatched out. I should label them. If you know my work and know me, I am so disorganized. Like, I have time to swatch it, but I don't have time to label it. Another thing that works for some people is making popsicle sticks. And like some people have like really, like this is a really cool craft that they have put together. They swatch all of their things out. Everything is super organized by color. It's just absolutely amazing. Mine, I tried really hard to keep it organized, and I'm really super bad about like when I have a new paint come in to adding to my collection. And so this has just kind of gone to a place that dies. Like I already know every single color on here. I have it cataloged in my brain. Like this is a mixture actually of two different colors that I put together. So this is useless for me, but for some people this really, really works well. And so like you can take, you know, just some different swatches and put them next to each other and say, wow, that's a really great color palette. And you just made your own color palette. So a lot of people really like that and it works for them. I have just found that I am too disorganized to stay up with it. So if you're an organized person, I definitely recommend you doing that. And it's also a really amazing way of just getting to know your paints. Like, you know, seeing how this kind of reacts like in the light and like it kind of registers in your brain. Oh, that would look really well with this color. And so it's just another really great way to kind of get a little more intimate with your paint. Also, this is the last thing I swear, but people ask me, how do I organize my paints? How do I do it by color? Do I do it by collection? And the easy and quick answer is yes, I do it by collection and then by color. So let me show you what I mean. Very quickly, if I were to do everything by color, I wouldn't be able to put all the Gessonias in one place. But since it's here, I kind of know the story or the family, the style that Gessonia has. If you know of Leona Hota's work, she does a lot of Gessonia pieces with Gessonia paint. It's beautiful. It's soft. It's a very different paint than like an Arteza paint. And so like these colors, they all go really well together, and it makes a lot of sense for me to keep those together. And this is true for all my paints. So I have my So Flats here, and all in one place. And, you know, that's not to say that I can't pick one from here, one from here, and one from here, but I can see everything, and it's all kind of, I try to keep it by color within their section. The basics is the same thing. They're all kind of tell a similar story as far as like, you know, how the colors are made. And this is true for the folk art color shift. They all kind of have a similar shifty story. You know, they're very beautiful. They all go together, and it's really easy to just kind of look down the line and say, hey, these are the ones that I want to use. And of course, for the rest of them as well. Also, I get a lot of questions about what the heck I'm stacking them on. These are fingernail polish bottle holders. And what's really cool is they fit perfectly for these size bottles. They fit right in there, and you can fit, gosh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 by 2, 3, 4, 6. 9 by 6 is 54 bottles of these here. So you can fit quite a few bottles in there. And these kind of slide in together nicely, but sometimes you get bottles that are a little too big. So somebody told me to flip the little holders upside down and install them upside down, and they become these little platforms, so your larger bottles can actually fit on there, and that is freaking brilliant. What a great idea. So whoever that was, I can't remember. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for the tip. And one more tip. This is a lipstick holder. If you start off with the Arteza metallics in the little small tubes here, they fit really nicely in this little lipstick holder, and they're like little soldiers. They're ready to be used. But I really like it this way instead of the container that it comes in, because I can see all my colors at once, and always in that container, the box that it comes in, the color you need is always on the bottom. So this is a great way to kind of navigate that, and it's really nice to keep everything all in one place. Okay, that was a lot of talking. I swear I'm done. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. Otherwise, everything that I talked about, I will put in the description of this video, and it's going to be super long, I realize, but I promise it will be there. So make sure to stay tuned for part 3. We're going to be talking about everything else that we haven't discussed yet. So stencils, watercolor pencils versus chalk pencils, how to leave marks, so how to erase marks, how to decide what surfaces you want to use, all the different kinds of surfaces you can use, making your own stones, like everything that we have left out here we'll be talking about in the next episode. Okay, so stay tuned, and thanks a lot, guys, for hanging out all the way to the end, and we'll talk soon. Bye.